My role at the BBC is to try to make a large organisation like that feel as comfortable as it can with the technology that is here and the technology that is coming and all the societal impacts that that has. So whether that's things like disinformation that we're talking about today, whether it is people feeling comfortable in their use of technology, feeling happy and relaxed in the use of their technology, how do we achieve those societal benefits? But also just making sure that staff are aware of the amazing things they can do and the new things that are happening. So everything from delivering content and starting to create content in gaming engines to the marvels of the blockchain. So everything that you might imagine that is coming, we talk about, we get people to talk about, we get them to think about how those things are going to improve their jobs and improve the experiences of our audiences.
So your internal, you spread the information. It's a little bit like me. But anyway, we're going to talk about disinformation, and there's a very specific, there's two projects actually that you are involved in. And the first one is about content authentication, and you do this with a big international consortium. Can you tell us a little bit more about that first?
Yeah, of course. It's a really interesting backstory as to how this came about. So we started to think about the disinformation universe that had started to emerge 2 or 3 years ago. We started to worry about how it was going to affect broadcasters like ourselves and other media publishers. And we wondered whether there was something we could do to make an intervention. So we joined forces, as you say, with a small consortium of Microsoft, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and the New York Times. And we then found that there was another consortium working in the same field, but just taking a slightly different view. So while we were looking at the point of publication onwards, they were looking a bit further down the media chain, and they were looking at content acquisition and the journey right from screen to screen, as they call it. So this was the Content Authenticity Initiative. We decided that we should join forces and form what's known as a Joint Development Foundation. And that has the aim of looking at how we might create open standards for provenance signals. So in other words, if you're a publisher or somebody who wants to have a piece of content that goes out into this vast social media driven ecosystem that we have, could we find a way of making sure that if you wanted to assign or embed signals in that content to show where it had come from and that it had not been manipulated, could we create some open standards around that to help that process take hold and become
those standards, are those standards comparable to, for instance, if you take a picture and you put it online, the picture itself already has a few attributes connected to it, which I guess you could change, but what kind of standards do you have? Is it just this piece of content was made by the BBC, or is there a lot more that you can include?
It's a lot more, and we wanted to have this system in place so that it can be very simple. You can just look and see whether there is something wrong with this content and then investigate further. For example, in a browser extension, just by seeing, we're used to seeing the padlock or, something that just gives you a signal that something may not be right with this content. But we also wanted to make it much more detailed so that you can interrogate what's happening with this particular piece of content if there is something wrong with it, or even if there isn't, you can look at where it's come from. So some of the standards that we're developing are around making sure that those signals are reliable. So we're looking at, for example, the blockchain to make sure that the signals that we use in this content are reliable. And we're also looking at we're working with organizations that are looking at how you describe content to people who are using it to make them understand what the manipulation might have been in a way that's helpful rather than in a way that gets people to reject. Because we know it in this disinformation universe that we live in, lots of people will reject being told what to think, and we have to find ways of making those messages palatable and acceptable.
So I can imagine, for instance, there would be a piece of video and you would get some information saying, oh, this video has been sped up, or this video has been, the sound is different from the things like that? Is that sort of the... Exactly
that. And we know that we talk about deep fakes a lot, but a lot of the things that we see are what we call shallow fakes, aren't they? They're things that have perhaps been rather inexpertly altered, but still altered, and the meaning has changed. And I think one other thing that's very important in this is just making sure that, that there are things that are done to content which are perfectly legitimate. We can compress it, we can resize it, we can do things with it, and we want to try and distinguish between genuine things that have happened which are not to worry about and things which might be harmful.